less than 2 miles from my house. Her body was found 17 months later. I never wanted to start EquiSearch. I was doing okay in the construction business, and then, of course, when Laura disappeared, it changed my life. But I would go out to where Laura's body was found, and I'd say, Laura, please don't hate your dad right now, but I cannot come out here anymore, Laura. I really have to say goodbye. I have to put my life back together. And as hard as this is for many people to believe it's true, I'd be walking away from there, and I'd turn that little corner, and over my left shoulder, I'd hear this little voice say, Dad, don't quit, please don't quit. And I'd say, damn you, Laura, just damn you. And I remember a family called me. Their 13-year-old daughter was missing, and this had been 6, 7 years after Laura's body was found. They called to ask if I could help, and I remember going into that house and looking in their eyes and seeing that look of helplessness and hopelessness and fear, and I thought, oh my God, that's what I had to look like for 17 months. Now, I don't know what hit me at that moment, but I made a promise to God and Laura at that moment. I would never leave a family alone if there was anything I could do. And that's why we started EquiSearch. It wasn't because I wanted to. It was a pretty stressful business to be in, and it doesn't pay anything. And we named it EquiSearch for equestrians, so we was going to use the horses just to be a resource for law enforcement and other search teams. I don't know if we was blessed or cursed at times when I look back, but our monthly meetings, we'd have somebody come and say, you know, we don't have a horse, but we belong to an ATV group. We'd like to join. It's like, my God, what a good resource. Somebody would come and say, you know, I'm a certified diver. I got my own boat and stuff. If you ever need me in the water, I'd like to become a member. We'd have pilots come and say, I've got my own airplane and I'm a pilot. If you ever need us, we're available. So our resources grew and grew and grew to the point where now we have more resources than literally most law enforcement agencies in the country. And they're all free. They are all free. We've never charged a family. We've never asked a family, let alone charged them. We've never asked law enforcement for 10 cents in reimbursement. And then we come along with Gene Robinson, that has been in how many searches for us, with a free resource. That's one of the most valuable ones we have. Of course, every resource we have has served its purpose at one time or another. But when we have these resources, and I promise these families I'm going to do the best job I can possibly do, our politicians and FAAs turning me into a liar, because I can't do my best job without every resource I have. When they won't let me use one of our best resources to help a family, to possibly save a life or possibly bring some closure to a family, I'm not doing what Laura asked me to do. Laura said, Dad, please don't quit. But you know what? I have to quit at times with the drone airplanes. It's a very valuable resource because of political reasons, with no consideration whatsoever for the missing person, which is always the victim. And then we almost victimize the families by not using every resource that's available. And it's certainly not fair. I will continue using that whenever I feel as though it needs to be used, and suffer the consequences afterwards. I'm going to live up to my promise, do everything I can do for every family that needs me.
The Spectra is designed for maximum ruggedness and portability. The aircraft is 56 inches total wingspan, and they're wrapped in carbon Kevlar and fiberglass. It weighs 4 pounds. It'll carry both a still digital imager and a streaming video, and it'll fly for about an hour. The aircraft is propelled by this small 9-inch propeller, and it climbs out at about 750 feet per minute. When it's on low cruise speed, it looks a lot like a buzzard in the air, and it's very unobtrusive and can fly very quietly.
I would have only known Gene Robinson if I would have only known the capabilities of the drone. You know, I can turn around and point to Laura and say, you know what, Laura, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You know, there's other missing girls out there just like you today that we're not allowed to search for with the resources that could have found you. We're still not allowed to do it.
These aircraft are set up with a still point and shoot camera and a video camera. When we do our searches, we typically use a high resolution camera like this that we can put in the aircraft, and it's protected and safe. It gets its own little seat belt, and we can protect that asset in the air and when it lands, because we never know where we're going to have to land. The systems that we use to fly the aircraft with can trigger the camera either manually, or if we have a stabilization system in there or an autopilot, we can set it up so that each image overlaps itself 30% or by 50% so that we can be assured of getting complete coverage of the area that we're trying to search.
Gene contacted our office, and I read the email, and he wanted me to get a hold of him, thought he could be valuable to search and rescue organization. And I think it was right around the time that we was doing Natalie Holloway's search and stuff, and I read his email, and I didn't call him. I said, oh God, here's a guy with a little model airplane that's going to fly around and tell me all this stuff he can do.
There was an organization out of Houston called Texas EquiSearch that we had known about for some time. We contacted them and offered our services to them, told them that we could provide them with high-resolution imagery and we could really help.
Then a month or two later, he emailed me again, and then 6 months later, Gene actually tried to get a hold of us for probably a year and a half, and then finally, we had a case in West Texas, and the guy was missing literally for 6 months. The detective called me up and he says, you know, his family just won't quit bugging me. I know this guy's okay out there, but we're just going to have to do something to shut the family up. So I thought, well, let me put this guy Gene Robinson through a test, just see if he's really willing to do something. So I called him up and told him what we had, and I says, you know, if you want to go out there, they can use our help.
We got called and they asked us to go out, and the case was 6 months old and the gentleman had been missing for some time.
And met with the sheriff, and the sheriff kind of looked at him and said something in the words like, oh my God, what do you plan on doing with that? And kind of shrugged his shoulders and walked away. And the very first flight that Gene made, he found our missing person's skeletal remains with a drone airplane. When I got the phone call, I couldn't even believe it. My search coordinator called me up, and I said, let me talk to this guy, Gene Robinson. He really did find it. He said, yeah, first flight.
Well, we drove out there the 5 or 6 hours to far west Texas and set up, launched the aircraft, and flew 3 times before it got too terribly dark. Went back to the hotel and started looking at the images and looking at the pictures, and I decided that I was going to go find my 2 white specks that I saw out there, and it was very shortly after that I found that man expired. And the bad part about it was the sheriff had told us that they had covered the area with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, and looking back on it, my own self, and I hate to admit this because I think I know everything now and then my own self, but what a learning experience it was. That how many families did I even deny access to the drone airplane for them 2 years that Gene was trying to get a hold of me? So the very first time when I was just putting him through a test to see if he was real, well, he proved in that very first one he was real. You know, the list goes on and on and on. It's, you know, what he's done. The majority of the ones that we found with Gene's drone airplane would have never, ever been found.
Just last April, we were involved in a case that was particularly difficult for us to get through. There was a 2.5-year-old child that went missing
in southeast Texas. Texas Rangers were involved, several law enforcement agencies were involved, and they had been searching for this child for 5 days and had nothing to show for it.
Texas EquuSearch, along with Texas Department of Public Safety, Texas Rangers, Liberty County Sheriff's Department, and many volunteers, probably at least 200, searched for the little boy on ATVs, foot searchers, side scan sonar, helicopters, with no luck.
You know, it's pretty emotional. They called that search off basically at noon that day on a Saturday. And majority of the searchers had already left. We kept a small handful of us around there.
On the final day, we called Gene Robinson, and he brought in a drone very similar to this one here that I have on my desk. Gene came down and launched his drone, and within less than 15 minutes, the camera on board, a drone very similar to this, spotted the little boy in the lake.
Little Devin Davis, as tiny and small as he was in the water with all the hydrillas, you couldn't get a boat through there, you couldn't do anything. There was literally 2 alligators in a very close vicinity where little Devin's body was found, and they had been in there over a week. So, you know, it could have been any moment, or certainly within a few days, that the alligators would have got to the little 2.5-year-old's body. Would have never ever been found if it wouldn't have been for Gene Robinson and the drone.
We took off for the first time at 9 o'clock using the Spectra Flying Wing. Made our first flights over some very disgusting backwater, black water, swampy areas that were full of alligators. We had armed escorts go with us because it was mating season for the alligators and they could be very protective.
We would have walked away from that search within the next hour at most, because everybody was tearing down and leaving.
We flew 3 times, and Angel, my wife, began the process of squinting those images. We call it squinting because you have to go through each one of those images very methodically and carefully to pick out the clues, that the things that don't actually belong in the picture or shouldn't be in the picture. And by 11:45, she had found 2 targets that were of particular interest. The mother had told us that the young boy was wearing a maroon and white shirt. We discovered that there in the lake was a red object, and the altitude is sufficient that it's difficult for us to make out in great detail what it is, but we could tell that there was, in this algae-filled lake, a red object. We went to the Texas Rangers Command Center, put the images up on their big screen, showed them what we did, and they immediately called in a helicopter. And as the helicopter came over, we heard over the radio, it was a code for ID. That young child had apparently walked off the end of a pier in the small little backwater lakes there and had gone under. And the bad thing about it was kayakers, searchers in kayaks had paddled right past the child, but because of their vantage point, they couldn't see him. There was enough vegetation and grass that you could be 10 feet away from the child and you couldn't see him. But the vantage point of the aircraft, being overhead looking down at that scene, allowed us to be able to see that red object and go out there and make the very painful recovery and have to tell those parents that we found your child, but the child is dead. It showed just exactly what the unmanned aircraft can do for the SAR, the search and rescue end of it, by saving resources. The helicopter had been in there several times and they hadn't seen him. The foot searchers had been all around the lake. It was miraculous that the alligators had not gotten to the child. Had it gone much longer, that likely would have changed. But we were able to make a recovery to give that family closure, and they could take their child and bury it and move on with their lives.
Had we been able to get the aircraft in the air sooner, we perhaps could have found the little boy alive.
Basically, they said, because there are no rules, we're not going to let you do anything, which was very frustrating. And the key component to that was commercial operations. We went to the effort and spent the money, time. It took 10 months to get a 501c3, which is a nonprofit charity, which by IRS definition is non-commercial, so that we could go out and use our technology, not charge people anything, and go out and essentially satisfy the requirement that a non-commercial event just took place. Unfortunately, that one was denied as well, because we were told that if it was operated in an official capacity, for example, a law enforcement agency or a fire agency, then it still falls under the same rules. We did manage to get the first civilian COA, Certificate of Authority, for a county here in Hays County in Texas, and we were even complimented on how well we wrote the application, and we were surprised that we couldn't continue along that same line. Apparently there was a paradigm shift in that as policy administrators, they changed the policy. Any unmanned aircraft, regardless of the reason, was going to be grounded. So the target kept being moved on us every time we tried to comply. Every time we tried to give them exactly what they wanted from us, they would tell us something different. Every single turn we took, it seemed that there was a roadblock to it. And neither academia nor business or anyone could overcome that hurdle. And it was, to this day, frustrating that you can't get more progress out of the process. It just seems to be that the FAA is now an agency of no.
The FAA decided in February 13th of 2007 to change their policy, which made the commercial use, as they put it, and the commercial use was defined as the exchange of $1 with no exceptions. Out of business overnight. But I was told, hey, you know, don't worry about it, 60, 90 days, we're going to have something for you guys and you'll be up and flying again. In which I was like, that's great, because, you know, mom and pop, and they're mainly the people that I'm concerned about, won't be able to hold out for very much longer, you know, as people are relying on this as an income stream. And here we are in, you know, 2013 with no rule.
We told everyone, we told the agencies involved, please don't say anything to the press. Don't do any reports that would go out over the wire. And they said, no problem, we'll do that, you know, and especially since we did actually find the child, they said that they would do that for us. Unfortunately, one media outlet put one sentence in at the end of the show that said, a drone was used to assist in the search. That's all they said. When we got back Monday morning from that search, my phone rings and it's my area inspector from the FAA. And he said, so, Gene, I guess we've been doing some flying this weekend, haven't we? I was shocked. I had no idea how they had gotten that close to me that quickly and found out that I had flown that mission and found that child. But they had found out. So it became very much like Big Brother was watching me. It was a little scary too.
You know, it's a shame when we're doing it because we are high-profile search and rescue team. Our success record speaks for itself. So when we're on a search, the media is just about always there. But we hide probably one of our very most important resources, and probably the most resource on many searches. We hide Gene over in the corner so the media can't see him, because the minute the media reports that EquiSearch is using Gene Robinson in his drone airplane, FAA gets involved in stuff and then tries to block the search efforts. And it's a shame we've got to sneak in one of our very best resources to help families.
The FAA now monitors all police wires and news media. If the word drone or unmanned aircraft goes across the wire, they have the ability to catch that and determine which police department sent it, which media outlet sent it. The FAA was finding out where we were going, and we couldn't figure out. We thought maybe we had a bug on us or something.
If it was my wife that was lost, my child, I would want everything possible used to recover them and bring them home safely, if at all possible.
And back then when Laura disappeared, I didn't know what to do. Parents aren't trained on what to do when their children disappear. We think we're all exempt from that.
So often, the immediate use of drone aircraft with its camera capabilities could mean the difference between life and death of a small child or one of our adult loved ones.
I wish I'd have known Gene Robinson back then. I'd have called him the minute Laura disappeared. Does anybody realize the value of these little drone airplanes when it comes to search and rescue, and what they've done for other families when we've utilized them, and we've utilized them without permission from our politicians. But I would love for them to go meet with the families that we meet with. We don't ask, we just do it. We brought closure to a lot of them.
Put yourself perhaps in a place of a Texas EquiSearch searcher, where family members come to you weeping, heartbroken because their loved one may be lost in the woods, lost in the field, lost in the body of water. And you have an instrument, you have a device, you have a piece of equipment that could help them, but yet you're restricted from using it. How do you tell these people this? How do you tell that person that we have something that could help, but we're not allowed to use it?
It would have taken one flight over this area with Gene Robinson's drone airplane, and he would have found Laura. I wouldn't have had to wait 17 months. I know that much. I truly believe, and I believe this is all my heart, and it wouldn't have been any cost to me. It would have been a long distance call to Gene Robinson from League City, Texas. It might have cost me $1. Nobody else did anything.
No one is a bigger proponent for drone aircraft than I am, because I've seen it work successfully. And Texas EquiSearch searches for children and lost individuals. I've seen it for this own Liberty County Sheriff's Department, where it's assisted us in searches.
EquiSearch is involved in over 1,300 searches across the country and around the world. I mean, we've been in 38 states in 8 different countries. Many, many times we go to search areas and meet with law enforcement and go look at the areas. It'd be, oh my God, if we could only get Gene right here now, if we could only get the drone right here now. By the time we're driving around and really doing our recon, what the drone airplane could do is save us so much time. We're going to know exactly what the areas look like. We can get pictures of them from the air. We'll know where the areas are fenced in. We can go ahead and see if there's any fresh tire tracks that are leading into an area. That would be a priority area to maybe start searching. And the time it could save us alone just in the very beginning, while we've got 6 or 8 people out driving and doing recon and doing mapping, is so valuable. Little Owen Castle case, if we wouldn't have been there probably wouldn't have been alive today. He wouldn't have been alive today. Time is never on our side, so we need to be very effective and efficient on our time when we go ahead and get a search started. When the community volunteers get in, they come out there because they want to search. That's what they want to do. They want to help. Unfortunately, in too many cases, they're just sitting around the command center waiting for us to do our recon, waiting for us to then go ahead and get stuff mapped out and give them their assignment to get out there. And if they would allow us to use these drones in the very beginning, right when we step foot on the search areas, we could have all this stuff mapped out, planned out, pictures attached to the field activity forms, get the people out searching. Time's the biggest thing. Time is never on our side when we get called on a search. There's so many things that we can see, and Gina's proven this when we've been on searches where several times she'll fly an area and it'll look like not look like it, there will be tire tracks going into a certain area that were on the ground, we really can't see them, and they show up so much clearer, and we always say this is a primary area that needs to be searched. A value for these families, a value for us, a value for law enforcement, the value for our tax dollars out there. How do you compare it? How can you have a better resource and deny that resource that's more than capable of saving lives? We've proven time after time it's certainly been capable and proven that we've found victims, whether it's been murdered or drowning or whatever the case would be. We found them in sometimes record time with a drone, which eliminated investigative time, which eliminated family going through 17 months of hell that I went through with Laura because there wasn't any help. So valuable to family, so valuable to law enforcement. And we got some politicians in Washington that just shake our head and think we're a bunch of idiots. They literally think we're idiots. I would challenge any of them to come down here and sit in this desk right here and answer that phone over there when a family calls, like let's just use for example Devin Davis's family, and the mother saying, please help me, I need your help, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, my son apparently wandered off, and I want one of these politicians to tell that mother on the phone is crying her eyes out, well, I'm sorry we got drone airplanes but we can't send them because I said Washington can't make a decision.
If something like that doesn't touch your heart, then nothing else will. I don't care how tough you are or how long you've been in law enforcement. It makes you want to do everything possible to return that loved one to that family, even over and above how you already feel.
We've witnessed some successes in search and rescue with unmanned aircraft systems. But just recently up there in Canada with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, we're able to employ the technology and find someone alive. And, it doesn't really come as a big surprise to me or, that it's, oh my goodness, we applied this and it worked. I believe in that promise. But when you look back in history at some of the issues where we could have used this technology to save lives, and I'm gonna flash back to Mount Hood, and there were several lost hikers up there, and several people went up there to look for them, and I think there were 6 people and 6 systems that went up there, and they rode in snowcats all day, and it was blizzard conditions, and these guys all volunteered to go up there with these small systems and search for these lost hikers. So it's almost like a made-for-TV movie, riding in the snowcat, and everyone's in the suits, and they get to these summer cabins where the ice and snow is blown in, and it's all against all odds. They get up there, they get their systems going, they're ready to fly. The FAA won't let them fly. They won't let them fly until the winds reached 60 knots, and manned aircraft were grounded. And then they said, okay, go ahead, now you can fly the small unmanned aircraft systems. Well, of course, 60 knots, the wind's moving. 70 knots, you got a hurricane. So I don't really think that was, these guys, what they went through to get up there and weren't able to fly until they were basically guaranteed to fail. All I can say is I'm glad, it wasn't my loved ones that were up there on the mountain when we were playing games with people's lives.
The big fact about when we have a missing child is that the first 24 hours is a critical time, and that 24 hours is way exaggerated. The first few minutes are the critical time. We don't have time to call Washington and say, hey, we've got this missing child. We'll get the police report up to you and stuff and wait for them to make a decision, which they're not going to make a decision. They're not going to make one. How many of these lives can be saved? Whether it's a child, whether it's an Alzheimer's, elderly with Alzheimer's that has wandered away, whether it's a mentally challenged one that has wandered away, this is a matter of saving a life or going to a funeral. Bottom line, it is. Why can't we use them? Why can't we use them? We can't really get an answer from the FAA. Everything is negative. Are they going to say that they're going to do it their own self? I know Gina's been working with them for years and we've still not gotten an answer. Is the government finally going to say, okay, then we'll do it, when then it's going to cost us millions and millions of dollars? They'll never be here in that critical period of time when there's an opportunity to save a person's life. Or worst case scenario, which is not the worst case, of course, is finding their deceased body and bringing a family closure, or if it is foul play, having evidence to go ahead and bring somebody to justice so the investigation can move forward and maybe possibly someday having an arrest. It's kind of disgusting in the world we live in technology. The military's got drones all over the place. They're probably watching us right now.
My name is Misty Gary, and I am a Texas EquiSearch volunteer. I have been with EquiSearch 3 years. I am repaying what they had helped me with. I had lost an uncle 9 years ago. I've been in the family situation, the hopelessness, helplessness, not knowing what to do. It's a fear that I don't want any family to have to ever go through.
It's truly unfortunate. And hopefully in the future, when we have someone that's lost out there and we can save their lives, we can use this low-cost technology to go out there and look for these people. Another good example was at Katrina. They couldn't get the authorization to fly, so what were they doing? They were taking AeroVironment Ravens, taking the wings off of them, and taping them to the sides or skids of helicopters to use their sensors. That makes sense? Doesn't make sense to me. You got people out there that their lives are in danger. They need medical assistance, and this is what we're doing.
There's nothing I would love more than to see a drone coming to get me.
I recall one case that we went on was in North Texas, near Dallas, just outside of Dallas. 7-year-old child had been missing for a while, and that was approximately 2008. And we were doing our best to work with the FAA and to comply with their wishes and to be as safe as we possibly could. We arrived on location, got our scene, and we contacted the local FSDO. Actually, it was Fort Worth Center. They were going to issue us a certificate of authority, an emergency certificate of authority. As we discussed the case with the parents there in our presence, the FAA official on the other end asked me how long the child had been missing. And I told them that the child had been missing 5 or 6 days, and his demeanor changed completely. And he told me on the phone that chances are that we would be working on a recovery. Was that my opinion? I said, there is a possibility, but I don't know that. The FAA official then told me that they did not deem that a life or death situation. So I handed my cell phone to the parent, and I said, this is Mr. So-and-so, the child's father. And as I watched them, he didn't speak much. He listened more than he did speak. I watched him grow redder and redder and redder as this FAA official told this parent that they felt it wasn't an emergency. I was very lucky to get my cell phone back in one piece after that, because the parent went into a fit of rage that made me back away from him very quickly because he was very upset. I disregarded the instructions given by that particular individual, and I flew that case. It was unsuccessful, but the parent at least knew that what technology I could bring to bear, I did so, and I did so safely.
One of the downside aspects of the opposition to drone aircraft, as I see it, it is perpetuating the slowness of training individuals to fly these aircraft, to understand the aircraft, to utilize them in a justifiable way. Many of these things takes time to learn, to understand. In opposing these drone aircraft, it only slows down the training process, adversely affects law enforcement. It would appear to me that at some point in our bygone history, surely somebody opposed bow and arrows when they first came out. This would destroy the earth. It didn't happen.
Just imagine the first person who invented a fire and said, it burns me and therefore I'm not going to use it. Can you imagine human beings without the use of fire, because the first person who touched it got his fingers burnt and said, from now on, no more fire can burn my fingers? Human beings would not have survived without the fire. Similarly, many new inventions that come into play, initially they create all kinds of problems.
New technology, new innovations are forthcoming. They will constantly be forthcoming. And anything like this that can be utilized to better serve the community is, to me, a positive move in the right direction. And it should not only be encouraged, but it should be supported by our government, by our other law enforcement agencies, and by the general public, because the overall usage of these drones is for the benefit of the public.
An area that is sort of macabre but related to search and rescue is forensics anthropology. We have started working with a university here that has what's called a body farm. And that body farm is used to research what happens to a person when they're exposed to the elements.
Laura's mother and I came out here walking around. They still wouldn't tell us where Laura's body was found. It was walking down that little road right there, and then we looked over this direction. You could actually see the flags in the ground and stuff. But what happened there is kids were riding dirt bikes. They got a foul loader, went over that foul loader only 60-some feet away from where Laura was found. And they thought it was a dead animal, and then they looked at it, and of course it was a girl who had been dead probably 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. It was in February. They never did determine really how long she was dead. And then when they were just walking around their investigation, basically just stumbled across Laura's remains. She'd been here the whole 17 months. Then when we came out here and looked at it where Laura's body laid, and as gross as it sounds, but it's so very, very true that where her body fluids came out and everything, you know, the grass was dead around it. And then looking at the crime scene pictures, it would have taken one flight.
Some of the common threads on the, you know, I do this podcast series, and some of the common threads are the, let's say, value that unmanned aircraft systems, the small ones, add to any effort. And in a search and rescue effort, you're talking about, you know, let's say, you ask people, you know, to fly a manned helicopter or small unmanned aircraft systems. You're basically, most of them will say that they've got a 10-to-1 savings straight away. Smaller operators that I would say mom and pop can go out and basically fly for their labor and some overhead to get out to the scene or whatever else. A lot cheaper than fueling a helicopter. The other one is the firefighters, you know. But in any case, let's say with a public safety to first responder, as a chief, as someone in charge, I have a limited amount of assets and people. And anytime that I can go to a scene or a site where, let's say, the public's safety is at risk, life, property, and anything like that, and I can employ a low-cost technology that is going to, let's say, conserve the use of my assets, both wear and tear, and putting these items in danger of being lost, and of course is going to save the lives of my people. I mean, it's really why we can't use this technology and the price point that it's at and the, let's say, advantage, situational awareness advantage that it offers to us is beyond me.
We may prize our privacy probably above and beyond most other societies, but can you imagine an earthquake in China or in India or in Pakistan or in any of the third world countries or in Africa where any human life would take great precedence, any reliefs of human suffering would take great precedence of any level of privacy. So in the international sphere, where privacy is not greatly valued, but human life is valued equally all over the world, a mother losing a child in India feels as much pain and sorrow as a mother losing a child in the United States. So in those countries, these humanitarian drones would have an especially important significance. And at least we would not have to worry at that point on what privacy laws are violated, what privacy principles are violated, or if someone is going to use the drones for some absurd purpose other than which it was intended. Everything we develop in this world can be used and misused. So here is a tool that has a great ability to be used for good. And of course, like anything else, it will be used for evil. But let's emphasize on the good, especially in initial stages. And as we progress, we'll develop better methods if we need to control privacy in order to control privacy. But in the meantime, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
We had an incident just recently where 19 firefighters were lost because fire had surrounded them and they were unable to get out. Even if we lost a drone aircraft flying over this area, surveying where the fire was actually moving in real time, the loss of a drone aircraft is not even comparable to that of one single firefighter. It would be the safety of the firefighters that we'd be looking for during a fire. They could see where the fire was moving, in what direction, what might be in the line of the fires, and the aftermath. The destructive nature of a fire is just incomprehensible. If the public could put themselves in the position of these people who have lost loved ones, to feel that same heartache, that same trauma, the same sense of loss that these people have felt, they will want every avenue explored. We should never be restricted from advanced technology.
I don't know if it's going to come to the point where we're going to have to take these families that we have helped and got results with the drones to Washington. If we have to load them up and take them to Washington and sit down with the officials in Washington to go ahead and get approval so we can go ahead and use these resources, we'll do that. You know, we can sit in here and we can be frustrated, which we have been. We can ask in very kind ways. We can email, which has been done God only knows how many times. We come to the point where we're just begging, please allow us to use this. The answer always has been, we'll take a look at this. We'll take a look at it. Take a look at a family's eye when they got a missing 2-year-old.
Going back to law enforcement, surveying train wrecks, overturned tank cars off of railroad tracks where there's contamination, poisonous fumes, where humans can't go into these areas. This would be a tremendous asset once again for drone aircraft to fly into areas where the atmosphere is contaminated, where they could survey the area to help in a train wreck. The same thing for traffic control, freeway accidents, where there's an abundance of cars involved, traffic control, which direction should the ambulance come in, which direction should the fire trucks come in. There are so many aspects for drones that can be used in public service organizations. Fire departments, it would be invaluable to them. Law enforcement, it would be invaluable to them. Medical teams, it would be invaluable to them. There are so many avenues that drones could be used, and the entire concept of the use of drones is for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to serve the public much better. And that is our obligation and our responsibility.
Because one society doesn't want to make progress in science doesn't mean that humanity stops making progress. So when we have an opportunity to do something good, both from the scientific as well as a humanitarian perspective, it is important that we seize that opportunity and do it not merely for the adventure of inventing something new, but also for improving our society.
Well, this has been going on for at least 10 years. And at all this time, the FAA, we're leading the way. I will say that when I do call the FAA, they do return my calls and they will talk to me and we can talk about things or whatever else. I think it's unfortunate. I don't think there's any oversight. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that to learn that the FAA doesn't even have an administrative procedures manual. And they just go about this stuff willy-nilly. There's no trail. It's kind of like a mystery. It's forensic. I'm working it. I figure sooner or later I'm going to get all this information and, connect the dots.
My name is Maddie Gary, and I'm a Texas EquiSearch volunteer. And it's really a shame that they don't want us using the drone plane, because if I went missing and I saw a drone plane coming to find me, it would be the best sight I'd ever seen.
I'm Kaylin Gary, and I'm a Texas EquiSearch volunteer. Our whole motto is to bring closure to the families. What if there was that one time that something happened to some little kid, or even me? They fell off a cliff, they got lost. There's so many things that could happen, and our resources aren't able to reach those people. We support the drone airplane because they're able to get to the places that we aren't capable of getting to. If I was out there and I saw a drone airplane coming around the corner, I would be so happy because I get to go home, and that's what we try to do, is bring everybody home safe.